The mkdir command on Linux, or the mkdir command, it is used to make directories. It's the command you use to create a new directory. For example, here in the terminal, right now I'm in my home directory. If I want to make a new directory, I would do mkdir and then the path to the directory I'm creating. For example, if I wanted to create a test directory here in my home directory, let me mkdir test, and I just created a new directory called test in my home directory. If I do a ls, I scroll up here, you can see that I now have a directory called test here in my home directory. Let me cd into the newly created test directory. If I do a ls, you can see it's an empty directory, of course. Now, mkdir does take multiple arguments. For example, inside the test directory here, if I wanted to create some subdirectories, I could mkdir directory 1 space directory 2 space directory 3 space, so forth and so on. If I hit enter and do an ls, you can see I just created directories 1, 2, and 3 inside the test directory. So by default, the mkdir command can only create a directory if all the parent directories already exist on the system. For example, if I did a mkdir, and let's say I want to create a new directory called directory 4/testdir/ and then somedir. I'm going to create like 3 new directories. A new directory called somedir plus the parent testdir, the grandparent directory dir4. And if I do this, it's going to error out because it can't create this directory because this directory doesn't exist, this directory doesn't exist, so it couldn't create this directory. But what you can do is you can give the mkdir command -p to create all the parent directories. And now if I hit enter and I ls, there is directory 4. And if I ls recursively with -r directory 4, you can see that directory 4 contains a directory called testdir and then a subdirectory in testdir called somedir. Now, if I look back up in my previous ls in this directory, you can see that all of these directories I've created, by default, they were created with 755 permissions. So they were created with 755 read, write, execute permissions, but you can actually make a directory and specify permissions when you make the directory. For example, I could mkdir -m for mode, and I could tell it, for example, a equals rwx, so all users equals read, write, execute. This is essentially 777 permissions, and then I could create a new directory. We'll call this one directory 5, and I just created directory 5, and if you look at the permissions, you can see read, write, execute is turned on across the board. That is 777 permissions. Typically, it's not what you want for security reasons. Typically, you don't create directories with 777 permissions, but that was just an example. Another way you could use mkdir and the -m for mode, instead of doing like a equals rwx, I could just specify the number of the permission. For example, 644 directory 6. And now if I ls, I just created a new directory called directory 6, and it has 644 permissions. And as before, with all the mkdir commands with the -p for parent flag or the -m for mode, you could do something like, -m for mode 755, and you could do multiple directories. You don't have to do one directory at a time. I could create directory 7, directory 8, run a ls. I created directory 7 and directory 8 with 755 permissions. And then finally, the last flag I want to mention is -v for verbose. Most shell commands, or many shell commands, have a verbosity flag or verbose mode, where by default, for example, mkdir doesn't spit out any output, but if you want output for each directory it creates, you can turn that on with the -v flag. For example, let's mkdir directory 9, directory 10, directory 11, and you can see now I get output as each directory is created. So there you have it, the mkdir command. Pretty much everything mkdir can do, I just showed you on camera. But if you want to learn a little more about mkdir, you can always read the man page. Type man, mkdir, in the terminal to read the manual.